Okay. Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing. Hey, welcome back. Got a new video for everyone today. This video's got some good stuff. We're using Vite. We're using a package that I found called Vue Query, which is similar to ReactQuery, which is an awesome package. We're using the new version 9 of Firebase, and we're just doing a simple kind of CRUD application with image uploads to Firebase using Vue Query to kind of manage your data state. So right now I have some documents already in Firebase, and I'm doing a query kind of to load them all. And then so let's just refresh. So I'm doing query to load them all. Then when I click on one, I'm doing another query to get to a specific item. And then I can actually upload a document. So I'm just going to select something from here. And it uploaded it, added it with the name, size, and the type it is. And then, as I said, finally, you can actually delete the object. So this is what we're going to show you how to do. We're going to show you how to do it using a package called Vue Query. And also, if this is the kind of content you like, please make sure you like and subscribe. Please make sure you share with your friends and leave suggestions on other things that you might find interesting. All right, let's get to the code. Okay, we're going to start the application right from the beginning. So let's start off by using Vite here to get our package. To get our project set up. So we're going to call our project vite.firebase.vue for Vue Query. And we are going to use Vue. And let's just use plain old Vue. So it looks like everything got set up. So now let's follow the instructions here. Let's change to our new project. vite.facebook looks clear, so we get our stuff right at the top. And then the next thing we want to do, let's start off by installing the library that we're going to use, which is Vue Query. Next thing that we want to do is, probably should have run an npm install first. Let me run an npm install first so we can get rid of these errors. Npm install. Okay, so now we installed Vue Query ahead of time, so now let's install Vue Router, because I believe we're going to need that, because we're going to have a couple of pages in our application. And then now let's install Firebase. Okay, so looks like we have everything set up. Let's now open up our editor. Worry about this later. And we take a look at the package.json, and to get this thing done, we just do an npm run dev. So let's go back to our terminal window. And we have our application running in localhost 3000. I'm going to use Safari today, since that's what I started with. And so here we go. We have our application running. Let's zoom in on this a bit and move this over. Let's get everything situated. Let's go through and do a little bit of cleanup before we go too far. So let's kind of get rid of this stuff. We're gonna we do not want our text align center. I don't think we want our color. And I guess I already did just some styles ahead of time. I think we reduced that to 40. And we need to kind of add some components. So let's just delete hello world view. We know we're not going to use hello world view. Let's move that to trash. So let's get that out of here. But now things are going to start to complain. So we got to start to lay out the basic. We now need to start to lay out some stuff for our app. And the first thing that we want to do is we need to lay out some routes. So to lay out our routes, let's go into our main.js. We know we're going to need to import the router. That's why. And let me close this to give us some room while we're here. We have two routes that we're going to use. We have a home route and we have a detail route. And so we're clearly going to need two components, a home component and a detail component. We need to create the router instance now. And I don't need this anymore because we're not using TypeScript. And then the last thing that we need to do is kind of add the use router. So let's go in here and do use, and then let's add our router. R-O-U-T-E-R. So now we have our router here, but we've got a couple of errors here because why is it complaining about app view? How did I delete it? Let's get this out of there. Okay. So we don't have any errors. Let's check back here. Nope, got no errors. But we're not doing anything. So let's kind of put some base components in place here. So let's go back over here, and since our app view is pretty empty, we're going to use our app view. So let's just copy. And let's rename this. Rename home. And we're going to rename this to detail. This is home. And let's go to our detail. Detail. DTAL. And we're missing our view router here in our app view. So we got to drop that guy in there. Did not import any of my views. So let's go back over to main.js. And I'm utilizing these components, but none of them have been imported yet. So we got to make sure we import our components that we're using. That's usually the best way to make sure that everything works. So let's import our home component and our detail component. So we got the app, the home component, and detail component. So home and detail. I made a mistake. I need to make sure it's on the latest version of Vue Router, and that's the Vue Router next. Now let's run everything again. And now we're where we need to be. So we have our home page, and then I have my detail. So there we are. We have our two components, our home and our detail. So let's start with the home first, because ideally what we want to do is we want to use Vue Query and just pull some documents that we already have in a Firebase database that I set up. So one of the things that I'm doing is I'm storing with Firebase credentials in a .env file, and you need to make sure you put that .env file, because sometimes this is kind of tricky. You need to put it right at the top level. So you come here to your top level, I'm going to say new file, .env. I'm going to save that file, and then in here I need to store some Firebase credentials. And so there's two things that I need. I need the project ID for Firebase, and then I need the bucket ID, the bucket name. So this is where you will stick your own values. I'm going to kind of block out for a minute here as I add my credentials in. Okay, I'm back. Now I've added my credentials in. And the reason why I added those credentials in is because I need to, and one of the first things that I want to make sure that I do is initialize Firebase when we get started in our application. So this is, although this is the latest version of Firebase, I think a lot of things are pretty much the same, and one of the things that are the same is kind of how you initialize it. So I'm going to come down right here, and before the app starts up, that should initialize the Firebase app for us. So let's format this, let's clean this up a bit. And so this should get Firebase initialized for us. But because I have now loaded in these values, I need to restart. Whenever you're changing the environment variables, you have to kind of restart everything. So let me Control C. Let me do an npm run dev to restart. And then now let's reload. So let's go up and import initialize Firebase. And now everything looks good. So we have Firebase initialized. We're coming to our default route, which is our home route. And so let's go into our home route right now. So you have it open up right here. Also notice this is kind of this new script template setup where you don't need to kind of do this setup and all this other stuff. You can just add your code right here inside of the script tag. And so that's what we're going to do. So in our home view, we need to render the list of things. And to try to keep this a little bit cleaner, I created a separate component to kind of manage all this, and I call it image list. So if you want to do some things around this, you can do it here in the main template, but the logic for rendering the list is inside of this component called image list. Let's just put a little title here. Let's say H2. So we got that on top. Let me gotta like this. And then we need to actually import our image view list. Sorry, our image list. So let's remember we put that inside of our script tag up here. Okay. So the file isn't there yet. So let's go over into our components, and we will copy detail view because it's pretty straightforward. And we will go into components, and here's where we will paste it, and we will rename it to image list. Okay, and so now it just is detailed, but we're going to start to add some of our code in here. And we're going to start off initially, well, actually, I'm already talking about it, let me kind of show you what we got. So, Vue Query, this is the NPM package that I'm utilizing. Hooks for fetching, caching, updating asynchronous data in Vue. Very, very heavily influenced by ReactQuery. Let me bring that over here for those of you, if you do both, ReactQuery. This is a very awesome tool. I have a couple of videos showing how to use ReactQuery with React, and so I'll add a link for those below, but these are the two things. ReactQuery kind of started off, and these Vue hooks kind of grew out of that. So, and what I want to do is I want to separate the Firebase functions out. So let's create a new file called Firebase functions.js. And inside of here is where we'll put the functions that we're using. I'll talk through them pretty quickly as we're using them, and because in the end I'm going to provide access to all the source code. So the first thing that we want to do here is we want to basically get all images. So we have this function here to get all Firebase images. So this is the basic function that we're going to utilize, but then let's import some Firebase. Okay, so in my get all images function, what I'm going to do is, this is kind of the new way you do it. So get Firestore here gets us the Firestore database. Then this says, get me the collection in the Firestore database with the collection name, image info, and then this says, give me all the docs. And then we do the usual. We loop through the snapshot, I push a result array, and I return the result array. This is asynchronous, and we run an await. This function is what we're going to use inside our Vue Query useQuery call. So let's save our Firebase functions. Let's go back to our image list, and let's go up to the top here and import some things that we know we're going to need. We are not doing mutations yet, but we know we're going to need to use the useQuery client, and this is how we get access to that. So let's just say const query client equals useQuery. And then underneath here, we actually want to do the query, and we're going to use a query hook to do that. We get our client, and here's the query. The images here, this is the key that's being used this is the key that's being used to cache this information and to keep track of it. So I'm just using the images key, it makes sense. And here's a bunch of variables that you get back that you can kind of utilize. We are not going to use refetch. We are using error, we are using data, we're not using isFetching, and we are using isLoading. So we need access to all these variables. And with this new kind of script tag approach, you don't need to do a return or anything. You just kind of define everything here and you have access to it. So now what's going to happen here with this useQuery, it is going to execute this get all images call. It's going to return the information. I'm going to get references for isLoading, for if there's an error, data, and the actual error if the error message returns. So we can go down, and there's some pretty basic stuff that you do to start out in a template. So let's kind of drop that in here. So we'll go inside of our template here, and so this is loading maps to this is loading. So if it's loading, I'll get this text rendered. If there is an error, what will happen is that I'll get my error back in is error, and so this will render. Otherwise, if not, I get data. And so that's what we want to render here. And so what we can do for now is we can just say data. Let's see, we have our script, we have our template. What didn't we do? We did not. This is one of the reasons why I'm missing kind of using TypeScript, because TypeScript will kind of catch the imports. So like I'm realizing by looking at this that I did not import get all images. So that's one of the reasons why this is not working. So let's say import get all images. And so we got get our images, we got our useQuery client, we have useQuery is loading, everything looks good. Oh, one of the things that we want to do, because Vue Query comes with a nice set of developer tools. Let's install the developer tools in our project. So let's just go to app.js and we can import the developer tools. And then down here underneath our router view, we can paste them in. And that gives us our tools. You can see our tools, it's got this little icon. And right now nothing's going on. And then the last thing that you definitely need to do is, which I missed this step, the first pass, is we have to make sure we install the provider. And so we just paste that in at the top, and then right here in the beginning of our app, we call useQuery provider. And the useQuery provider, as you can see now, everything's starting to come together. The useQuery provider allows us to get access to this query client here, which allows us to make these API calls. And so as you can see, I'm getting the results back from the query. And if I open up the developer tools, I think I'm going to set this thing to default to be open at startup so that we can see the information in it, because it looks like it has a problem updating. Let's set this to true. Let's kind of bring this down. Let's reload. And you can see there's the images query that I just made. All right. So let's kind of clean up this UI a bit. I have a bunch of styles that I put in place already to kind of make it look pretty. I'm not going to kind of talk you through all the style. I'm just going to kind of cut and paste. So just observe. And as I said, I'm providing access to all this code, so you will get access to all this code. So let me just quickly put some stuff in and then kind of talk through it. So what we're doing now is we've kind of just created some nice little cards for all the images that are there. That's what we have for now. So we have our data rendering, we have our nice little cards. And so the next step, what we want to do is we want to be able to click on a card and actually go to the detail page. And so that's going to be another query, but it's going to be a different type of query. So first let's go into our Firebase functions and add that query. And the query that we want to add is we want to be able to just get one document. Let's switch back over to our Firebase functions. Here's our get all images. Works similar to, we have the get docs. This is the get doc. So we say, we need to import a couple of more things from Firebase. So we need to import this doc call. So let's add that in there. We have the collection. We have the get firestore, and it looks the wrong one. We need to add get doc also. Let's get just the bug statement out of there. Let's add this get doc. Oh, not that. All right, and what this does, it says in Firestore, in the collection image, there's a document with this ID, get me, that kind of converts it into a doc reference, and then get doc gives me the doc data based on this doc reference. If it does not exist, then I throw an error saying that the document was not found. Otherwise, I pull the data off and I return it. Once again, this is asynchronous, and so it gets sent back. And so the same, let's take a look at what we did in image list. The same way how in image list we did this kind of use query to get all the documents, we're going to use the same approach to just get one document. And to kind of simplify our detail page, let's add our click here, which we already have. So you can see here, when I click on this div, it takes you to the detail page and we have the ID. Now I need to actually do something for that in the detail page. The detail page is going to be very similar to this page, where we're going to have some data and then we're going to have some functionality up at the top. So let's, we know we're going to have to execute a query. We know we're going to need a client. We know we need this. Actually, let's just copy this whole script section to get us started. So we're going to copy the script section. We're going to go over to detail view. Let's replace the script section. We want get. What is the function? We don't want get all images. We want get image document. And this useQuery is going to be structured just a little bit different on this detail page. And so what's going to happen is that so this is the key, but what we're going to do is inside here, we're going to say key, and they recommend that you use the ID as part of the key. So we're going to just say key, we're going to say doc ID. So this way, this result will have a unique identifier. Let's kind of format this. And then we need to have this function down here. But since our function needs a parameter, we're going to do it a little bit different. So we're going to go like this. And in here, we're going to pass the doc ID. And so this is how we're going to execute our query. We're going to call our getImageDocument call. We're going to pass it a doc ID. But first of all, we need to get the doc ID. This is a little bit interesting how you do the doc ID this time around. What we're going to do is you make this call. So let's go up here and get our doc ID. I need to actually define the prop in here, and it's called doc ID. Okay, let's try this again. All right, we get a little better. So we're actually getting the image, and let's see what data it got back for us. And so we're getting our data back because we can see it down here inside of our Data Explorer. Now we just got to render it in the UI. So let's kind of walk through again what we did. This get the property, which is the ID. We're defining our props a little bit differently here. So we're saying we have a property, it's called doc ID, and we get our doc ID. We need our query client, very similar as before. And then we have our query hook. We're passing a unique identifier or a query key. We're saying images, and this is the doc ID. We're using a unique identifier as part of the key. And then we're calling our getImage function. And then we have the same isLoading data error stuff that we had on the previous page. So let's go over to the previous page and utilize some of that. Let's give ourselves a little bit more room. Utilize some of that same code. So let's go to image list. We're just going to take all of this again. And go to detail view. And we're going to go up here. And we got to close this data out. And we can show we have everything. We just put our data there. And you can see there's all the data. And now we're back to the same kind of exercise of making this page look pretty. So we're going to use the same approach as I did last time. I got some styles and I'm going to drop in, and then after I drop them in, I'll kind of explain what's going on. And I put this whole thing in a section, so let's kind of fix that. And so there you have it. There's my card. I think I have missing a little bit of padding on top. So, but we can worry about that later. But this is the card that we're getting rendered on our page. We need our back button so we can get back to our home page. So let's add a back button to our UI. We're going to add it right up here above this is loading. We're going to have it bring us back to home format. So wherever I go home button, so now I can go home. I can see my images. Let's click this one. Here's image 2. Ooh, this guy's a big one. Let's go home. Here's our other images. So as you can see, we can now actually look at our images. So that's what we wanted to do. Let's now move on to actually adding an image. It all has to start with some sort of user action from the client to make the action happen. So we're going to add a button on inside of our image list, probably in the right place for it, but let's put it there anyway. That's what I did in my sample that I have already proved works. And let's go inside of my section here, and then button to upload file. And this, let's just comment this, render list data. All right. Once again, copy and paste some code and just kind of explaining what's going on. There's a trick to making this work. There's the trick that I use is I put a real button down. So there's my real button. But then what I do is I take my real button. It's also, I want to wrap this in a section too to kind of get some styling. Let's put a section there. Section there. So now there's my button. When nothing's happening because there's no file open dialog to call. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to trigger the normal ugly looking file input. So if I'll show you what I'm talking about. If I say input type file, right, this thing is kind of ugly looking. You choose file, it comes up, you kind of put it in there and you see the name. We're going to try to, we want something a little nicer looking, so we're going to hide this file input and we're going to just trigger a click on it. So now when I click this button, the idea is when I click this button, I need to trigger this button. And the way I'm doing that is, let's go up here into my script section. So open the file dialog when the button's clicked. And what we see, it's looking for the element with the ID, file upload. I've added that. So now open file dialog, when I click this, it will find this item, click it, and open the dialog box. So let's see what we get. Let's save this first. And you can see I'm clicking it and it's opened a file dialog box. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the file that I get selected and that's the file I'm going to upload. So what we're going to do is when we get a change event here, we'll call the function to upload the file. We're going to add a change event here, and on a change event we're going to call the function to upload the file. Okay, so kind of what am I doing here in the code? So what this is saying is that when I get a change event, i.e. a file selected, this code is going to check and see if there's actually a file selected, so I'm going to check for length. And if there is, I'm going to call a mutation function and I'm going to pass it the file. Right? So the same way that there is a useQuery, there is a useMutation. And that's what we're going to add in our code here. Well, let's follow the process that we had before. The way the process works is we do a Firebase function and then we add the Firebase function to the hook. Okay, so here's the function to upload an image. As I said, if we go back to our image list view, so here's our Firebase function. And we don't need the console log to params, it's going to be a file. Let's add a couple of, we have some new imports because these imports are related to storage library. So let's make sure we bring those in. And we can just add them underneath. And so we have the get download URL, because after we upload the document, we want to save the download URL. We're going to call the get storage to get access to the bucket. We need a reference, and then this is the call we're going to actually use to upload the bytes. Because with upload bytes, you're going to upload a blob, int array, or an array buffer. A blob is the same as a file, so that's what we're trying to upload. So that's why I brought all those over. Now let's go down to our function. So the parameter that's getting passed in is the file, and we're going to get the storage bucket. We're going to give it the path. We're going to get the file name that's passed in, so it's going to be images with the name, and then we're going to get a reference. And then we're going to use this reference here, and then we call the upload bytes. We pass it the reference. We pass it to params. This param is the file, and then we give it some additional options. And the option I'm passing is the file type. This basically confirms that we've actually uploaded it. Then I take the storage ref that I get the download URL, and then I'm writing a document in a document collection called image info, and we're doing an add doc. We get the collection, so we go to Firestore, we look for the collection name image info, and then we say add a doc, and then I specify the data, and I'm adding an object called image data, and inside that's the size and the content type, passing back the name and passing back the URL. I add that document to this collection, and then I just return the data snapshot. So that's the mutation. That's the function that's being used by the mutation. And so now let's actually do the mutation. So we go back inside of our image view list. We have our query hook here. Next, we're going to add our mutation hook. So this is our mutation hook. Very similar to what we did with our useQuery. So we're not passing key, but we're passing in the function. So this is the function. What we're doing here is on success, we're using our query client. We're going to invalidate the query of all images. So that's going to force it to reload all the images. So this will make sure that we get the newest image data. So let's add the import. So we need to add our useMutation, and we have our query client. We need to add our upload image info, and we got that from Firebase. So everything seems to be compiling right. Now there's some interesting things that's happened with this mutation. So you call this useMutation, and it gives you a mutate function that's on here that we actually call it to execute. So here we let's make this a bit clearer. Let's call this a upload mutation. All right, and so then now we go down here, and right here we're going to call. So if I get a file back, then get my upload mutation, call the mutate, and pass it to file. And then we get all of the interesting stuff back from our upload mutation. So for example, you could say if is loading, and now we don't want to do it on the is loading because we want the screen to stay there. But what we do want to do is we do want to check this error. We want to know if we get a mutation error back. And the way that we can check for the mutation error back is this code. And it's a little bit different because for some bizarre reason, I mean, this package is still relatively early. The variables that we're getting back from mutations are actually references. So I need to kind of render them a little bit different. This is for view heads, this whole hat. So I have this is error is a ref, so I got to pull the value off of it. And the same thing here, the error, I got to pull the value off the error object. Let's switch these mutations to, because I renamed this to upload mutations. Let's switch this over to upload mutation. So if there's an error, there you go. So now this will render any mutation-specific errors. I think that's what we got. Let's see if we're lucky and we can get it a run on the first go. Get it all to work effectively. So let's give it a try. So upload image, selected image. An error has occurred, reference error, kind variable, add doc. So we're getting our error messages displayed. Looks like I missed an import. So let's go back to Firebase functions. And yeah, I didn't do add doc. Let's add doc in there. Let's refresh. Let's try this again. Upload new image. Looks like it executed some query. Let's see, where did it put my, okay, what's going on? Let's open up my debug tool and see if I can figure out what I'm doing wrong. It says it uploaded it. Oh, there it is. There's my new upload. Let's try another one. There it is. So you can see it's uploading the images as we select them. Oh no, I guess I just needed to refresh everything. You can see the output being logged here. And I can click an item, and I need to do some styling, some wraparound here. But I can click an item and go see the specific information on the item. Here's one of the newer ones. What's left to do? I guess the last thing left to do is actually show how to delete an item. And a delete item is another mutation. So let's go over to our detail page. And we are going to kind of follow the same approach. Let's add the delete function from Firebase. So this delete function works very similar to the add doc. The only difference really is that we're calling delete doc instead of add doc. You pass a document ID, look at the collection image info from Firestore, and delete the document. So let's go up to here. I have my delete doc import done. Let's save that function, and then let's go to our detail view. And we need to add another button to actually delete. Let's see if I could fix, why is this pre? Let's see if I just change these to divs. We'll wrap then. All right, there we go. A little bit better. All right, so let's add a delete button to respond to a click event. You click on it, and then we execute the mutate. Here's our mutation. We're going to call this delete mutation. Let's take this debugger out. Same as before, we pass it a function that we want to execute. This is a delete image document. We have our delete mutation. For our delete mutation, it'll be a mutate function. We'll pass the ID that we want in. On success, we want to invalidate the query so that we get the latest information, and then we want to go back to the home page. That's what this router replace does. So, and for get the router replace to work, we need to add another import here. So I need to use view router. Well, let's get my view router over here. Put it up top here. And then off of view router, I'm going to use this use router to get access to my router. So we'll get my router under here. ROUTR. Now I have my router. And that's going to kind of do the router replace to send me back home. Now, what else is missing? I need my delete image document function. So let's go in here. Add a delete image document function. I have not imported my useMutation, so let's go up here. And so here we have our document. Looks like everything's fine. I need a button to actually trigger calling the mutation. So let's add a button here. We have a delete button. And then for our delete, we want to call our delete mutation. Let's copy that. Delete mutation, the mutate. We're going to pass it the ID, and that should delete our document. So let's just delete. Let's refresh everything. Let's go back home. We have everything. Let's delete this one. So let's click here. Delete. It removed it. You can scroll back through our list. You can see it's gone. Let's refresh. Gone. Let's delete all the new ones. Let's delete. So it's gone, and it excuse me. Let me close this. Close. And it kind of updated the UI. I guess I must have added this one twice. Let's delete it again just to make sure. So yeah, everything's all deleted. Refresh. Let's close this guy again. And everything's good. So just to wrap up, we showed how to add an image by using the upload. We showed how to list the images. And we just showed, once again, how to delete the images. There's probably a couple of extra things that we could do, but I want to just cover kind of the basics here. We could show a way to kind of edit the video, edit a card a little bit. And the other thing, for those who have a keen eye, if you noticed that in my Firebase function here, where I am where's my delete document? Where I'm deleting my document, I'm not actually deleting the file out of the bucket. And so that's the other part that might be missing. Also, I haven't implemented authentication, but the real purpose of this was just to show you how to use Vue Query inside your Vue application. I hope you found this enjoyable. Please make sure to hit the subscribe button. Please make sure to share, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, and bye.